Welcome back to part 3 of this Milky Way editing post-processing video. In this part of the video, we are going to manually align our different exposures here. After that, we're going to convert them to a smart object and then do a median blend stack on them to reduce noise in the sky. To start off with here, we have our base layer, which from our previous one was of the sky. After that, we have two other layers which are going to merge together, or align first and then merge together, and after that we'll kind of be ready to go. So with this first layer here selected, I also renamed it base just so I know which one it is. That's going to be our point of reference image. So as we turn on these other ones, you can see the sky moves a little bit between each exposure. If you go to the final one here, it moves even more from the first one. So what we're going to do is just kind of work our way through these. In some cases I might have 5 images here. Probably my worst case scenario I would have 7, but usually I have 5. In this case I'm just going to go through 3 here for the sake of efficiency and speed of the video. So what I'm going to do here is click on this next layer, change the visibility here, and then I'm going to go to the blend mode here and go to difference. And the process that I'm using here too, first of all, is basically what Ian Norman of LonelySpec.com uses, where he's manually aligning different exposures to reduce noise. And you can find that video on YouTube as well, but I'm just kind of repeating the same process that he does. There are programs and software out there that you can use that will do this automatically for you. I think for the Mac there's one, and the PC has another one, but I've tried the one on the PC. I just don't like the results of it. So what I've been doing for the most part now is just manually aligning them in Photoshop. It usually will take, for maybe 5 images, it might take about an hour to do. But after that, I'm really happy with the level of noise reduction that it does, and from there I can create the best image possible. So with that said, I've selected and turned on the second layer here, and then I've went to difference mode. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is zoom in a bit here. So what difference mode does is shows you the difference between 2 different layers in Photoshop. So you can see here that the stars moved a little bit between these 2 exposures. You can see basically, like, literally that the stars here and there. What we're going to do is kind of smooth that out, and the best way to do that is to first transform it. So if we go to edit and then transform, and then actually I don't even know how to do this. I think right here, free transform. So I would just hit Control T on a PC. From there, I use my arrow keys to try to line these up as best as possible. So just hitting the left arrow here, you can see it slowly getting closer. And then down arrow now, left arrow again, and right there you can see it's really kind of lined it up as best as possible. You can see there's the fringing there is pretty much aligned perfectly, and really what we want to do here is just align the middle part of the image. So after that we'll zoom out again, and now we're going to look at the corner of the image. So if you go up here and zoom in a bit, and let's just go up to this corner part here. So the next part we want to do is try to just align the corner of it. So now you're going to want to hold down Control, and then when the cursor turns white up here, you've kind of done it right. So we hold down Control and then just left click this corner up here, and then we're just going to drag it just a little bit, and you can see we're just trying to line it up as best as possible here. Let's see if it's even doing it for me here. Sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error, so we go up a little bit. That was too much. Go back. Depending on how fast your computer is, this can go quicker too. So there I've kind of got it. I really didn't move it a great deal. Whoops, and I screwed it up. Let's go back up again. Back a little bit. That's probably it. There we go. Let's just look over the mouse button, let go of Control. You can see it's pretty well lined up there. We're going to zoom out, zoom in a little bit. I'm just going to move over to this other corner here. I'm going to do the same thing on this corner. So click Control, then left click, and then just kind of move it ever so slightly. And this is always trial and error. I always kind of screw this up the first couple times. Trying to move it around. That looks pretty close there. Let's let go and zoom out. And if your Milky Way, I don't know if you can see it enough in this corners down here. In this case, I can barely just see it. I'm just going to try to do this corner as well here. It's really hard to see because I'm zoomed out so far here. There we go. Let's just maybe zoom in just to confirm here. Maybe a little bit better, and that's something we can try to clean up later too. So left click. I'm just going to try to line it up as best as possible. And just a forewarning too, I am a perfectionist, so some of this stuff I will probably do more than you would want to do yourself. A lot of these photos I spend upwards of 8 hours on them, and that doesn't mean that you have to. It just means that I have a problem. So there we go. I think that's pretty good. So now that we've done that, you can see the differences between the photo are becoming much smaller. The final step that we need to do here is actually edit, go to warp up here and actually edit individual sections of it. And I was finding here when I was doing stacks of 5 or 7 and doing this repetitive motion where I'm kind of holding the left mouse button down for long periods of time, I actually started to develop a pain in my finger knuckle, my pointer finger knuckle, and I had to kind of figure out a way to automate the holding of the left mouse button click. So I found a program down here called Auto Hotkey for Windows, and you can actually kind of map a key on your keyboard to like permanently hold down a mouse button or whatever, right? So what I did is I mapped a button to the left mouse button, so when I click that button it toggles it on, and it's kind of fake permanently holding down my left mouse button. And that's how I can do this. I don't know, it just seems to help a lot. So watch what happens here when I hit the I have a map to the Windows key. If I hit that, it kind of permanently holds down my left mouse button. And I find too that lets me do a little better alignment job here, because I'm not so I find when you're kind of holding the left mouse button on, your brain is kind of doing 2 things at once. So it just relieves me of that duty. So let's go over into this panel. So again, we're just going through the image here and we're trying to align the different sections of it again. So now we're just doing panel by panel of the image. So let's bring this down a little bit here. Let go of that. So every time I click the Windows key, it's like fake lets go of the left mouse button. So zoom in again here. And remember, we're just working through each panel of the image. So now I'm hitting that Windows key to simulate the fake left click. And this was using that program called Auto Hotkey again too, if you want to give that a try out. A lot of video gamers use it for mapping keys and stuff like that. So let's try here. It's kind of trial and error. You just have to click around a lot and find the areas that you want to manually align. And you'll notice over here too that this is kind of slowly loading, so depending on the speed of your computer, when all those tiles load, you can usually start doing these actions. Because I'm screencasting right now, mine's a little bit slower than normal. Got that lined up there, so zoom out again. And remember, we're just working our way through, so look at that panel, it's almost perfectly aligned. That one really has 0 issues. Some of these down here will just blend out later. I would say in general this is a pretty good align job here. So when you've done one, first hit enter at the end to just get out of transform, and that will just take a second. You'll see it loading here. Once that's done, we're going to go up to difference here and change that back to normal, and that's going to return it just to the normal view. And what I like to do is go and rename the layer once I've done it to just done. And at this point, what I would recommend too is actually saving the image. So if you go to save as, I really like using the PSB layers in Photoshop, and PSB layers are basically large document format layers in Photoshop. So a Photoshop file by default, I think it has like a 3 or 4 gigabyte limit in file size. And if you use a PSB file here, I don't even know what the limit is, but it's so big that I would never reach it. So I like to just save everything as a PSB, because then if I'm halfway through editing a file and all of a sudden I add a couple more layers to it and stuff like that, and all of a sudden Photoshop can't save it anymore, it's too big, I don't have to worry about that. So I just always save them as PSBs now. Something to think about if you're as you edit. And with those bigger stacks of not JPEGs, but raw files over here, you really bump into that max size pretty quick too. So let's pretend like we saved it. We're going to zoom in here quick and just confirm that our changes look like they're aligned good, right? So notice as I turn this on and off, the stars are staying where they're supposed to be, and you'll notice that the arch here is moving a little bit because we've actually aligned the stars but not the foreground, and that's something that we're going to fix in a little bit here. So really all we care about is just making sure that the stars are aligned. And you can see as I toggle back and forth here, there's very little movement. There's a little bit, but it's not something that's going to be an issue. So now what we would do again is move on and make sure you hide this middle layer that's done. We'd move on to the next one, and then from there we'd go to difference, zoom in on it, right? And then we would repeat the process again. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to just do it a little quicker this time, but I'm going to do it again. So here I'm hitting Control T, then using the arrow keys to manually align the stars. And we're really just concentrating on the center of the image right now. So zoom in a little bit more, get a better look at it. I like to look for larger stars. I call them reference stars, and I'm no astronomer or anything. I'm sure they all have names, right? But for me, they're just points of reference to kind of align the stars right. So it's toggling back and forth here. You see what the best. Sometimes you get real close. It's almost tough to say which is the best alignment. And then we move on to the corners, right? So go up here. Zoom in a little bit more. At this point, we're going to do the hold on Control again, and then when our cursor turns white up here, we're ready to go. And then from there, I'm just going to move this around a little bit. My mouse button, holding the left mouse button down while I move it. And it's always kind of a trial and error here until you get it right. There we go. That's good. So zoom out. Zoom in again. Now we're going to go over this corner. And again, hold down Control, click, left mouse click. And then we're just going to keep moving it around a little bit until we get it aligned. Sometimes you can spend a lot of time doing this. Like I said, this often takes me about an hour to do a stack of 5, maybe 45 minutes sometimes. But I think it may seem kind of silly right now, but when I show you the final image, you're going to realize just how great image stacking is. And I feel like a lot of people I see on some Facebook groups and stuff who post Milky Way images, a lot of them don't do this, I don't think. I can just see that their Milky Way images are very noisy, and whether it's because they use too much of the clarity filter in Lightroom, or just of any reasons why, I can just tell they're kind of noisy. And remember, the final step, we're going to go up to the free transform up here, or warp I guess, and click that, and then we're just going to zoom in. Here's again our reference star that we saw earlier. So, and again, I'm using the auto hotkey thing over here. So if I hold the, if I click or toggle, and then, which is my case, the Windows key. If you didn't have auto hotkey, you would simply just hold down the left mouse button and kind of move it back and forth. So there we did that. You just want to try to align that reference star as best as possible. We're going to zoom out a little bit here. And there's another one with the Milky Way. There's a lot of good large stars up here to align by. This one over here, I think. Yep, here's a nice sized one. A couple of them, right? So let's try to line those up as best as possible. And sometimes it's pretty much impossible to get them just right? So we just gotta keep. And it might also help to look at some of the other stars, so you're not just aligning one of them. You're you know, at the end of the day, you're actually aligning all of the stars. So don't let your eye get stuck looking at just one of them as you try to align it. Here we can see some differences, right? And what I found is the Milky Way is actually kind of moving across the sky and rotating almost at the same time. I mean, again, I'm no astronomer, but it seems to be kind of the movement that's going on here that we're trying to correct for. Look up here again, and you can see some bright differences, right? You're going to find a lot of them that are more in the corners of the image too. Zoom out. And the one area I like to really make sure is aligned as good as possible is the core of the Milky Way. So that, in this case, that's in the center of the image. So, you know, under the arch here, running through the middle. Some of the ones on the outside are a little askew, right? That's okay. That's not where people are going to be looking with our images. That's not the focal point of it, right? So, really making sure we got these center ones just right. So, again, here you can spend a lot of time in this. I think I have a file kind of prepared already, which I've done a stack of 5 of these. But in this case, I just want to give you a quick overview of how this works. So we'll hit enter here to get out of the transform mode. And then in this case, I would go and rename this to done. Change it back to normal. And now that we've done all of them, I'm going to just turn all the layers on. And then the next step, you know, we would save it here again. I recommend always saving it after you get one done, because it takes, you know, 5 minutes or so, and you don't want to start over again, right, if it crashes or something. And then after we've saved it and we've done that, the next step we'd want to do is right click on this and convert it to a smart object. And this is just like we did with the foreground here before, where we converted it to a smart object. And the next thing after you've done that is you're going to want to go to that smart object. Let's pretend this is one here. Go to Layer, Smart Object, Stack Mode, and then click Median over here. So we've converted these 3 to a smart object. Let's pretend we did. And then we're going to go to Stack Mode and make them Median. So I'm going to flip over to another file here where I've kind of worked ahead, if you will, and done a stack of 5 images in this case. And if we zoom in real close here, let's get all the way into the Milky Way. Let's just look at this. Now, if we look down here into our original file, and I turn this layer on and off, you're going to see what I mean when it comes to this this noise reduction here. So look at that. Just look at the huge difference in noise, and you can really kind of make it stand out if you bump up the exposure here a bit. So here I've bumped it up 2 levels. If you see much as I turn it on and off, you can really see that noise reduction getting reduced. And that's why we spend that hour of time. I mean, some people may argue it's not worth it, but being the perfectionist I am, I really just try to go the extra mile and do as best of a job as I can with images. So just turn it on and off. You can. I love doing before and afters of my images. It's just so much fun to see how far they've come. So look at that. Look at that noise reduction. That's great. Really impressive. And that's just a limitation of cameras, right? They're just noisy. But you can overcome that by doing this smart object and then a median blend. And this is what the deep space astrophotographers do with their photos, except they're taking hundreds of photos, and you know, there's software that does a lot of this stacking for them as well. But in that case, they're usually using a tracker, so the sky never moves, right? The tracker actually moves with the sky, so they don't even have to worry about alignment at all then. So now that we've done that, the next step, you know, save the image. I would also recommend with these smart objects here is saving or rasterizing them. We don't need the aligned images anymore. So there's technically 5 images inside of this. We don't need those anymore. So we can just go to here and then go to rasterize. And the reason you would do that is it just keeps your file size smaller. And you know, when you're going to save the image and stuff like that, it doesn't take so long. We don't really need all that historical steps anymore at this point. And what I like to do too is just save a file, a separate file, when I've done the alignment here, because that part kind of takes a while. And I just save it and I call it aligned. And then I'll create a second one just called -edit, and that's where you start to do all of your you know, your actual, you know, color changes and enhancements and stuff like that with the photo, and that's where I'll do all of my other changes. So if I ever want to come back to kind of the base of it where I aligned it, I can come into this one here and do that. So that's kind of the end of the manual alignment part of this. What we'll look at next is blending the 2 focus stacked images. So again, here we have the ground, or you know, the arch, which is focused here, and then we have the sky. So we're going to look at blending those 2 together, which can be a little bit of a work, but definitely worth the end result once we've done it. So thanks for following along so far.